Hey everyone, it's Connor again. I hope you are doing well. Recently I have been thinking of my response videos from the past and how they hold up over time. And while I was reviewing some of my work, it was announced that Tucker Carlson had interviewed alleged war criminal Vladimir Putin. There were many takes on the interview, with much of the response to Carlson's announcement being heavily critical due to Carlson's history of sympathetic statements about Vladimir Putin and his illegal invasion of Ukraine. In one instance, Carlson demanded to know why he should care about the Ukrainians, going so far as to say that he was rooting for Russia.
So Hunter Biden did not. I know Hunter Biden. I actually like Hunter Biden, but that's totally corrupt, and you know it. Why is it worse to ask about it than it is to do it?
Because people are dying on the front lines. You think it's a joke?
Why do I care? Why do I care what's going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? And I'm serious. Like, why do I care?
I'll tell you why.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
Because those of us who are watching, myself, who think preserving democracy is important. When Dick Cheney said what the Russians did was an attack,
I don't care.
It was a warlike attack on the U.S., and I think if Donald Trump gets off the hook on this, he's going to put the arm on the Chinese and everybody else.
Carlson would later claim that this was a joke, but considering the framing he gives to his audience for this interview suggests that it, like many other things Carlson says, is a cover for his real intentions. Carlson's history of pro-Russian commentary should be enough to suggest that Carlson was not going to be a reasonable or balanced interviewer, but that context and the larger concerns surrounding Carlson's intentions in interviewing Putin were sadly misrepresented by none other than conservative podcaster Kevin Phares. Those who have been watching my show will likely know Phares, as I have previously made a response video to his coverage of the Mar-a-Lago search by the FBI. In that video, I went over his failure to adequately address the laws regarding declassification and how his overarching use of partisan distrust prevents him from seeing the bigger picture. Since then, he has expanded to YouTube, mixing his live streams with his radio show through the conservative station Cities 92.9. He is now a contributor to the Breakaway USA podcast, as well as several other shows. He has also taken to political provocation, such as his decision to troll demonstrators at an anti-DeSantis rally in Peoria.
Mind if I see your sign? What are you guys out here protesting today?
Hate, discrimination.
In what way?
Intolerance. Ron DeSantis just doesn't accept free thinking, individual rights. He wants to decide everything for everybody. Authoritarian.
So my body, my choice, my freedom, my voice. What is that in reference to?
Reproductive rights.
So reproductive rights, you mean abortion then, right?
I mean, reproductive rights. It's healthcare, women's rights for healthcare, and hey, you're a man, so I don't think any man has any right.
I actually identify as a woman.
For the sake of this video, I am responding to his February 11th stream titled Why Joe Biden is the Worst President in Modern American History, in which he once again lets his partisan distrust blind him to the bigger picture. As always, my sources and video credits will be included in the description below, and you can find Kevin's video so you know I'm not misrepresenting him. Introducing Carlson's interview framing, Phares argues that the media seeks to maintain propaganda for the Ukrainian government, and that our media is supporting the U.S. involvement in the war.
I keep getting these messages out here, but now I got another story for you guys. Now, here's the thing, we'll have our president that's not even able to get through 12 minutes without making an absolute fool of himself. However, in Russia, their dictator, president, whatever you want to call him, will be able to give you a 30-minute rant, almost as if he's like an autistic person who just asked about every train ever, about Russian history and the Ukraine war. I'm not going to talk about every single part of Tucker's interview with Vladimir Putin, but I want to talk about how America responded to it. Not America, you and me. I want to talk about America, the media. So let's start off with just this announcement that Tucker made, that he was having an interview with President Putin. Take a look and listen to this clip right here.
And yet the populations of the English-speaking countries seem mostly unaware. They think that nothing has really changed. And they think that because no one has told them the truth. Their media outlets are corrupt. They lie to their readers and viewers. And they do that mostly by omission. For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they've done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House.
So Tucker makes it clear that the reason he is going over there, and even if you watch that full introduction to the fact that he was doing this interview, you will hear Tucker say, this isn't because he by any means agrees with Putin. This isn't because he thinks Putin is a great guy, or that Putin is somebody he wants for everybody to hear in terms of in a positive light. No, he's doing it because we've seen the American media fawn over, not even just the American media, we've seen American politicians fawn over Zelensky as if he's some like Superman, Batman, Iron Man hero. But we haven't even understood the other side.
Nowhere in this section does Kevin provide a specific example of an interview fawning over Zelensky, nor does he explain an appropriate approach to interviewing or covering a president defending his country from a foreign invasion. In fact, I would be surprised if a journalist didn't give respect to a leader defending his home from foreign invaders when covering him, especially when said invasion was completely unprovoked. It is worth noting that Zelensky's response to the initial invasion by Russia was part of the reason that Ukraine was able to hold it together in the first place, as he stayed in Kyiv even as it was under attack by Russian forces in February of 2022. And it is especially damning that Phares argues that there are two sides equally worthy of consideration here. Zelensky is the president of a country that is defending his nation from an illegal war of aggression that has displaced an estimated 6.3 million people, according to the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees. By contrast, Putin is the one who has initiated this war and has a warrant out for his arrest for the kidnapping and deportation of children from Ukraine. These two figures are not equal and shouldn't be treated as such. There is no equivalence between Putin and Zelensky. Continuing on, Phares encourages his audience to watch Tucker Carlson's interview and rightfully criticizes Putin for his more kind view of China. However, he also creates yet another false equivalency, arguing that Carlson is being criticized for journalistic actions taken by other figures, pointing to a 2001 interview with Putin by Barbara Walters.
And I recommend everybody go watch. I mean, it can get boring, I'm not going to lie. I watched the 2-hour interview between Putin and Tucker. I watched it throughout multiple sittings. And there's things that I found Putin to say that I'm like, man, that's interesting. But at the same time, then Putin would say that he thinks China is amicable and wants to compromise with people, which by no means do I agree with. And I think that's the problem. And we're going to talk about that problem. But we're going to first talk about this problem, which is the fact that as soon as Tucker announced in the last week that he was going to be doing an interview with Tucker, that Tucker said he was going to do an interview with Putin, the American media comes out and says, oh my gosh, this is so awful. Tucker Carlson is going to be a shill for Putin. That there was many, even on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, that saying that he should be barred from re-entering the United States, that he's pushing propaganda, that he is a terrible person, and for even engaging with the devil that is Putin. Really, Tucker Carlson is terrible apparently for engaging the devil that is Vladimir Putin. However, several decades ago, it was like at least 2 decades ago around, when Barbara Walters interviews Putin, it wasn't an issue. Take a look at this clip.
He is only the second elected president of the new Russian Federation. Boris Yeltsin was the first. Putin's administration is committed to massive changes in the way Russia is governed, does business, and deals with the outside world. Putin is now one of the most powerful men in the world, but he is little known in America. He and President Bush seem to have connected with each other in ways that surprise most pundits, and may have surprised them as well. President Putin has been preparing for next week's summit meeting in his Kremlin office, where I met with him before our interview. It's my great privilege.
So Barbara Walters meets with him. She's not a spreader of propaganda. No, she's just doing what her job is as a journalist. Tucker Carlson, as he says, is over there. As the American media fawns over the pornographer and actor Vladimir Zelensky, we're not allowed to ask questions of Vladimir Putin or at least hear what he has to say.
It should go without saying, but the context of American relations with Putin and the role Putin played in world affairs has changed significantly. When Barbara Walters interviewed Putin in 2001, Putin had yet to invade Ukraine and was actively discussing the need for cooperation between the United States and Russia, as well as responding to terrorist threats around the world, as the transcript of the interview shows. When Walters was interviewing Putin, he hadn't yet ordered the 2008 invasion of Georgia or the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. Carlson can't say the same. Putin is an alleged war criminal now, and the reality changes how reporting handles his presence. That much was evident to many, especially after the Russian Federation faced allegations of genocide, something I reported on in April of 2022. Simply put, the context around Carlson's interview with Putin is far more dire than it ever was with Walters. But even worse than that, Phares goes out of his way to clip CNN anchors outright to make them look like they are complaining about something they are not.
And when they're not trying to say that Tucker's an awful person for interviewing him, they're also admitting that Tucker did what they couldn't. Take a look at this clip from CNN in which they're obviously very mad that Tucker Carlson was able to get an interview when they weren't. Take a look and listen to this.
That's a lie. Serious news outlets, including CNN, have requested Putin to interview over and over again.
No, but they never got one. And so they're obviously, maybe that's the reason it is. Maybe they're just simply butthurt that they weren't able to get an interview.
If you were to use the clip provided by Phares and only that clip, it would appear that CNN's Abby Phillip was upset about not getting access to Putin. However, take the full 20 seconds of that segment and the meaning changes significantly.
We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin.
Tucker Carlson is lying from the streets of Russia, no less.
Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin.
That's a lie. Serious news outlets, including CNN, have requested Putin to interview over and over again.
In this case, it becomes clear that Phillip was responding to Carlson's claim that journalists in the mainstream media were not trying to understand Vladimir Putin's point of view. As Phillips rightfully argues, Journalists at CNN and many other outlets have tried to reach out to Putin, but for the last 2 years, Putin has refused access to American journalists. Only Carlson received permission to interview Putin, and considering how little Carlson cares about facts, I am not surprised. I could go on about the numerous other complaints that Phares provides throughout the tail end of his video, such as his frustrations with Hillary Clinton and Chris Wallace, but at this point I would be repeating myself, and quite frankly, I have little interest in defending either of those two. What matters here is that Phares' coverage of the interview by Carlson is, at best, misinformed and lacking in critical context, and at worst is downright dishonest. Whether it is falsely claiming that Carlson is on a Ukrainian kill list, or creating incorrect equivalencies between Zelensky and Putin, Phares consistently demonstrates a failure to inform his audience about the context of one of the largest conflicts in recent European history. I do hope for some improvement from Phares, but with this being my second response to his coverage, and considering that he no longer links his sources in the description, I doubt that improvement will ever come.